was a typo. And I'm like, welcome to Under Two Capes. I am Jared, and I'm here with Aaron Sparrow. Welcome to the show, man.
Hey, thanks for inviting me, Jared. We've been kind of like bouncing back and forth trying to make it happen. So I'm glad that we were finally able to nail it down.
Heck yeah. So my first question for you is, what got you into comics?
Oh man, I mean, I had comic books when I was a kid that, like, my grandmother would give me just random ones that she would bring over, like, oh, Aaron likes Star Wars, so like, I had some of like the really early Star Wars comics, and but what really got me in was, because I was I had like Archie books and things like that. My great grandmother would give me, and so I was kind of like already interested in reading. I was a big reader as a kid, and I really liked the art. But what really hooked me in was G.I. Joe, because I was already kind of like interested in the G.I. Joe action figures. I'd bought a couple of them with my allowance, but I didn't really know like any of the story behind it. And then I started seeing the commercials on TV for the comics. And so the next time I was at 7-Eleven or Circle K or whichever store, liquor store that I happened to be at, instead of buying a candy bar or a soda, it was like, oh, that's a G.I. Joe comic. Let me pick that up. And as soon as I picked it up, I got hooked. And, so I picked up a couple more issues. And when then I got to issue 16, which was called Night Attack, that was the one that was like, that pushed me over the edge. I was like, I now want every single one of these. And then my uncle was like, you're reading comics? There's a comic book. They sell older comic books in the back store of the coin shop that's next to the place where you get fish for the aquarium. And I was like, what? And he was like, yeah. So he took me down there, and, just being able to get back issues was huge. So I started completing my run that way. And then everything, every book that I had ads for the X-Men, had ads for Spider-Man, and I knew who Spider-Man was because of the cartoon, and, because he was pretty prevalent in like merchandising. And so I started picking up some of the Marvel books, and then eventually I was just hooked into Marvel. Then I got into Batman. Batman led me into the DC universe, and pretty soon I was reading everything I could get my hands on. Comico, all the little indie publishers that were springing up in the late '80s into the early '90s. I was all over it.
Those G.I. Joe comics that are coming out nowadays are so good. Like, oh God, though, I was concerned because I'm like, nowadays, are they really going to do a very pro-American, armed forces book? And then I read this and I'm like, yeah, they did it.
Yeah, they. I was cautiously optimistic about Skybound taking over, and Joshua Williamson. And then, I read the 2 miniseries, read the Duke miniseries, I read the Cobra Commander miniseries. I really liked both of them. He made me actually like Cobra Law outside of the context of the one movie. I liked it in that animated movie, but I never wanted it to permeate on any other part of G.I. Joe. But once you're mixing them with Transformers, and you're doing more fantastical elements, and you're doing Void Rivals, and you're kind of like expanding that universe outward, what they did with Cobra Law really made sense. And I'm really enjoying it. I just finished issue 6 today, and I posted on Twitter that like, this is my book of the week and why I love it.
Yeah, exactly. See, that's the thing. It's like when they were first off, that's the other thing. The Transformers books are utterly fantastic, but I was a little concerned when they were going to combine the two, because I'm like, I know they've crossed over before, but I'm like, okay, so now you're making a universe about this. How is this gonna work? And then I was pleasantly surprised when I'm like, oh, okay, so that's how you do it.
Yeah, because when I read the first Transformers G.I. Joe miniseries that they did back in the day, I didn't really like it. And then when Transformers was going through Generation 2, and they brought Megatron into the book with Cobra Commander and Dr. Biggles Jones, and kind of did that, I liked it better because, Larry Hama at least was, writing it well, even though I'm pretty sure he probably didn't want to do that. That was one of those edicts that came from corporate. But he did a good job with it. So I was like, okay. And when I heard they were going to do this, I was like, well, let's see what they do, because IDW had tried to combine all those franchises. I had actually been asked to consult on that and submitted some ideas that I didn't get hired to write, but somehow still ended up in the books. But they absolutely tanked that. My idea was, because the question that was asked me was like, well, what would you do with like Mask? How would you incorporate Mask into this universe? And I said, well, I would start out with Mask being the human, the humans get some of the Transformers technology and adapt it to their vehicles. Their vehicles transform, but they're not alive. They can do like mild transformations with them. And I said, but they should be like the human response to the Transformers threat. And then you have some of that stolen technology fall into the hands of Venom, who, could be an offshoot of Cobra, maybe not, but it depends on how much, connective tissue you want to draw. and then you build your series from there. And that is what they ended up doing. But they hired another writer, and then he made he race swapped Matt Tracker, and I told him immediately. I said, "This isn't going to work," because I looked at the ads and I saw Black Matt Tracker, and I reached out and I said, "Oh, hey, is that like Hondo McLean? Is like Matt missing or something?" And then at this point, I didn't know how much of the stuff that I pitched was going to end up in there. And it's possible that people just arrive at the same ideas, but it seems coincidental.
Yeah.
So, I was like, oh, is that Hondo McLean? Because that's kind of cool. I always like stories where, you have like one of the understudies kind of step up into the main role. And I thought, if you're building like a mystery around Matt Tracker, then that's cool. That could be cool. And it was like, no, that's Matt Tracker now. And I was like, oh, this is all going to tank. And they were like, why? And I said, because there's no current mask fandom or mask cartoon or mask media that's being put out that is introducing a Black Matt Tracker to a new audience.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
The only audience that you have for Mask is the old audience. And they're going to look at this, they're going to look at the race swap, and they're going to say, oh, that's not my mask. And they're going to skip it.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing. It's like, I get what they're going for, and they're saying, okay, we want to bring in the mythical new audience. It's like, that's why we get like 80 race/gender swaps of characters. The problem is they do it, are pissy about it when we reject it, and then are like, why aren't people buying our books?
Yeah, it's like, oh, it's not, it's not for you. Okay. And then they're like, well, where are you? Well, you told me it was not for me. Everything you did said it was not for me. And with a property like Mask or a property like G.I. Joe, like I understand wanting to have a diverse group of characters, diverse backgrounds, diverse ethnicities. It's like I'm doing that in Kneel Before Doomface. But you already have that with a property like Mask and G.I. Joe. They're already ethnically diverse.
Yeah, exactly.
So, when I saw the G.I. Joe movie, I was like, why is Ripcord black? Why is Marlon Wayans playing Ripcord? There are other black characters on G.I. Joe that he could play. Then I, saw the movie and I was like, oh God, I'm glad he wasn't playing Stalker or somebody like that, because, that would have totally ruined the character for me. So maybe it is better that they swapped him out, because Marlon Wayans ruins every film that he's in. But, yeah, it's like with Mask, you've already got all that diversity. With G.I. Joe, you've already got all that diversity. It's literally built into the property from the inception.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like my favorite lie, and I call it straight up a lie, that's being advanced by the modern comic book industry, is that these characters have just been straight white people since their inception. And I'm like, that's objectively false. I mean, that doesn't exist. And that's the thing. My theory is that they do it because they want the credit for doing so, because they're narcissists.
Yeah, it's like, oh, look at this thing that I did. It's like Tom Taylor making John Kent bisexual. It's like, he just wants a GLAAD award. He doesn't care about the character. He doesn't care about selling comics. He doesn't care about the fact that he didn't create this character, and this character actually could go on. And, with the Super Sons, now granted, Bendis had already aged him up, but, with the Super Sons, they had a hit. And now you've taken that character away from ever being a hit again. John Kent will never be a hit again, because you've made him a niche character. Also, Tom Taylor could pursue a GLAAD award and be on CNN.
Well, yeah, speaking of Toms, so that was one of my many criticisms with Tom King on Wonder Woman, because he creates Trinity, the daughter of Wonder Woman, and basically makes her this big deal, when literally you could tell the exact same story with Donna or Cassie or even Yara at this point. But again, because he wants royalties, that's why he does it. Plus the fact he can't help ripping off other people's work, so that is his issue.
Does he get royalties though? Because it's my understanding that if you create a character that's a derivative, you don't get royalties.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
And Trinity is a derivative, so he may not get royalties on that at all. He may have outsmarted himself. Which
my theory is that she's not gonna exist when he leaves the run. I think they're gonna ignore the character, because. So here's the funny thing. The Wonder Woman fan base has completely rejected Trinity, to the point where they basically call her Wonder Woman's Demon Spawn.
Can we just get some solid creators on Wonder Woman?
Yeah.
Who's the biggest creator that's ever worked on Wonder Woman? Is it Byrne? Is John Byrne the biggest?
I think it's Perez, right?
I think Byrne's bigger than Perez, because Byrne was a writer and an artist.
Well, I will say I want Adams to get on Wonder Woman. He wants to, and with what he did with Green Lantern and Aquaman, I think he could do a fantastic job with it. Plus, he already has a reputation rehabilitating characters that King has destroyed. So
That's
there is
true.
that.
That's true. It's like
It's
he's gotta come
literally
in and,
like his thing.
it's really like, I mean, it's not the challenge in comics. You've got to come in and you've got to clean up somebody else's mess, because people always ask me, they say, like, you know, what would you write if you could write for Marvel? And I was like, I'm never going to write for Marvel. And they're like, no, but if they came to you and they were like, you know, you can carte blanche, you can do whatever you want. You know, which like 2 characters would you want to take on? And I'm like, my sensibilities say I'd want to do Captain America and I'd want to do Guardians of the Galaxy, but maybe just one of those. And then the other would either be Kamala Khan or Carol Danvers, just because I want to see if I could fix them. Yeah, I want to see if I can actually make those characters work.
Have you read the Brian Reed Ms. Marvel comics before she became Captain Marvel? Because those are actually really good. And I'm reading those, and I'm like, this is not the same character.
No, it's you know, Ryan Reed was writing it. I believe Lepresti drew most of that run. You know, so of course I was picking it up because I just automatically pick up anything Aaron Lepresti does. I love his work.
Oh, absolutely.
And he's been a really great friend to me ever since he met me as a dumb kid, you know, coming to a Comic-Con for the first time. So I always grab his stuff. But yeah, no, she was a great character. Claremont wrote her well. Brian Reed wrote her well. It wasn't until they put her in the hands of Kelly Sue DeConnick, and Kelly Sue DeConnick decided to make her bitter and angry, like she is personally, because all these people do is write self-inserts.
Yep.
And everything that I've ever written, none of the characters are self-inserts. Like I'm not that interested in me. I'm not that interesting.
Yeah.
So like, why would I want to put myself in a comic? I want to write things that are more exciting than my life. And sure, you know, as a writer, you draw from things in your personal life or your experiences or things that you've read or that you know, that whole wealth of knowledge goes into creating characters. But I try to create things that are very different than me.
Well, yeah, and that's like one of my that's another one of my issues with King on Wonder Woman, because he straight up says that like Steve Trevor is his insert because he was like in the military and stuff, or like in King's case the CIA. So Steve literally does everything in this run, and everything Wonder Woman does is based on Steve. So I'm like, but I'm not reading a Steve Trevor comic.
Well, at least the man is doing something in this one besides crying for the help of his mommy wife. That's a little bit of a departure for King, isn't it?
That's true. But so, by the way, so it's kind of funny. So my friend and I did a stream once that was like, what if Bendis had never come to DC? And when you look at the second and third order effects, because you don't get Kelly Sue coming on and ruining Aquaman. So like so much stuff was affected by that one decision that we were like, it's a different company now.
Yeah, no, it had a cascading failure effect. Yeah, she got Aquaman canceled, and it wasn't until are you reading Jeremy Adams' Aquaman? It's really good.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Again, Jeremy Adams coming in.
Exactly. No, it's because again, I was talking to Jim at Weird Science with this. It's because the thing about Jeremy Adams is he knows what the fans want to see, and he writes the characters as they are supposed to sound.
Yeah, every character sounds like themselves. Every character acts like themselves. He tells stories that are interesting. He tells stories of heroism. There's not a lot of the like the current day political navel gazing that you get from so many other writers now, which, you know, it's like, look, we all live in that world 24/7 every day. Every time we turn on the TV, you know, whether you're for or against, whatever, you know, we all live in that world. So how about we just have a little bit of escapism and we deal with things that actually make sense within the fictional world of the DC universe or the Marvel universe. I was talking with Wes on Thinking Critical about the fact that they keep going back to, we got to keep working in stories about global warming, climate change.
Here's why it doesn't work, though.
Now Dan Slott's doing it in Superman. There literally is a planet B in the DC universe. There's a planet B, a planet C, a planet D.
Well, not only that, there's like 3 characters that could solve climate change with a snap of their finger, literally.
Yeah.
So I'm like, that. See, here's the thing. What you could do is like, you could still tell the same amount of the same story, kind of, but in the context of DC. And what I mean by that, if you want to tell, like, let's say a police brutality story, have a story where like a couple of Green Lanterns are like beating up on people. That way you keep it general enough that way if you and I just want to read it for escapism, it's like, okay, it's fine. It's like it's an interesting story. But if you're actually going into it to find a message, hey, there you go, it's right there. It's kind of like the way the X-Men used to be written. Emphasis on used to.
Yeah, it's been a long time since that X-Men, let me tell you.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you can draw on real world events and real world situations, and that's what makes stories resonate. Is when you can recognize things that that kind of like speak to our shared humanity. But when you've just got when you will only hire people from one side of the political aisle, people with one viewpoint, and that viewpoint is in lockstep 100%. Nothing interesting is going to come out of that because there's no story that's challenging you. It's just propaganda at that point. It's just regurgitating the party line and telling anybody who steps out of the party line that they're not welcome. And so that limits your sales, that limits your talent pool. And the problem we're seeing at Marvel right now is there is absolutely no one talented who wants to work for Marvel.
Yeah,
they don't pay enough. Number one, to attract talented people. Number two, why would you ever want to create anything interesting for Marvel that they then own completely? It becomes part of the Disney IP machine, and if it ever becomes anything else, you don't get good royalties off of it. You maybe get an invitation to the movie premiere, and then like Rob Liefeld, they don't even invite you to the after party. It's like you were treated so poorly for your IP. You're better off just keeping it for yourself and putting it out yourself and owning all of it and seeing, just bet on you. Don't you don't need Marvel anymore. You don't need DC anymore. You don't need the mainstream.
I mean, look at Ed Brubaker, where he said he made more from his Winter Soldier cameo than he did for creating Winter Soldier. So I'm like, that's ridiculous because it's like, particularly in the case of the Marvel movies, when you're making these movies that are used to be making $1 billion off the backs of these guys' creations, you could at least compensate them a little more fairly.
I have the same problem kind of like with G.I. Joe at this point. As much as I love the books and I'll always buy A Real American Hero and I'll always support Larry no matter how curmudgeonly and crazy he gets, because he gave me so much of my childhood. The fact of the matter is Hasbro has made so much money off of G.I. Joe over the years. And I know they're not in the condition to do it now, but during COVID, when they were boasting about how they were having record profits, you couldn't have peeled off $1 million and given it to the guy that created all this stuff for you. Thank you for your lifetime of service. Thank you for all of this amazing IP that you've given us.
No,
and you know what the problem usually is even when you have a company that wants to do something like that. For example, I know for a fact that when Don Rosa, longtime Disney comic artist, Life and Times of Scrooge McDuck, famous, for his duck work. I know that when he was having eye problems and he needed like eye surgery, cataracts, all kinds of different medical things, there were people in Disney publishing who went to the higher ups and said, can we do something to help him? Can we pay for his surgeries? Can we do something just to show the appreciation? Because we sell the Life and Times of Scrooge McDuck all the time. We can show you a balance sheet of how much money we've made off of Don Rosa's work over the years. Can we do something to help him? And you know what they were told?
What?
It would set a precedent that we don't want set.
Oh, God damn it. Yep, there you go. By the way, so speaking of G.I. Joe, I know the answer, but I want to ask, what did you think of that Snake Eyes movie?
Oh, I hated it.
Me too. I was like, what the hell is this?
I hated it from the moment they announced the casting because, again, it's so weird to me when you are trying to correct some perceived racial slight and you end up being more racist.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, oh, well, he can't, this white guy can't know martial arts. Only Asian people know martial arts.
I know. And I'm like, isn't that a racial stereotype? And I'm like,
yeah, it's like, okay. I mean, you still have plenty of other Asians that know martial arts in the movie.
Also, he's speaking. I'm pretty sure that's not something Snake Eyes does after a certain point.
Yeah. And it's like, and even in the comics, when they show flashbacks before his accident and before he had trouble speaking, they keep him quiet. It's always like he's a quiet individual and he's more interesting that way. Yeah. Like, can you imagine the movie Soldier with Kurt Russell if he was just talking through the whole film? It wouldn't have the same impact at all. There's something about the quiet badass. And I don't think Henry Golding did a bad job in that role. He was just horribly miscast. Honestly, he should have been Shang-Chi And Simu Liu should be working at a convenience store somewhere in real life.
You would have made a good Shang-Chi. I could tell you that.
He would have been a great Shang-Chi. He can actually emote with his face, which is something Simu Liu can.
Well, yeah, exactly. And I'm like, well, first off, there never should have been a Shang-Chi movie in the first place. Because that's my issue with like a lot of these.
Well, there really wasn't, right? It was just
really
a generic martial arts movie in the skin of Shang-Chi.
Yeah, exactly. But that's why probably like a lot of these like movie studios now is that they're made like even this is my concern with the DCU by James Gunn. He's announcing too many of the D-list characters first instead of like maybe a actual Wonder Woman project. Get a Batman movie coming out and before you start throwing in like Sergeant Rock and Swamp Thing and Peacemaker. And I'm just like, because this is the issue you had before, because after the travesty that was Joss Whedon's Justice League, you then started bringing a bunch of C and D listers without focusing on building up your A-list cast.
Yeah, you've already shot yourself in the foot. Like, oh god, Justice League was absolutely terrible. I can't even believe like. Oh, my friend called me up and he was like, "Hey, let's go see a movie." And I was like, "What do you want? What do you want to see?" And he was like, "Let's go see Justice League." And I was like, "I'm not paying to go see Justice League." And he was like, "Oh no, I'll pay." And he like really wanted to go. And we went. And then when we walked out, he was like, "Yeah, you were right. We probably should have saw something else."
Yeah, exactly. See, with me, because here's the thing. So when I first saw it, I had the nostalgia goggles of, oh my gosh, we're watching a Justice League movie on there at first. I was like, oh, this isn't that bad. Then I start hearing what was supposed to be in the movie and what was cut out. Then I start watching it again. And then I'm like, ah, man, that Henry Cavill lip just looks so horrible. It's like the more stuff is starting to add up. Like, oh, this is horrible.
Mm-hmm. And then you're like I was looking at Steppenwolf and I was like, why does Steppenwolf look like he stepped out of a PS1 cutscene? He looks awful.
Or he's
like,
Liam Neeson in armor. Because he looks like Liam Neeson, and I'm like, what the hell, dude?
And then when you got the Snyder cut, like he looked so much better. I actually bought the action figure of the Snyder cut version of him because I was like,
he looks intimidating.
And the armor, like when all the arrows are in him and the armor moves and snaps them all off, I was like, this is cool stuff. This is much better. I would have much rather seen this movie. And granted, we wouldn't have seen that exact movie because
it would have been at least like 2.5 hours of a cut down, which that's what Zach does. He added things. He added things that he didn't have ideas for, back when he was actually working on it, and that's all fine. But it's like it would have been if Warner Brothers wouldn't have got scared, you actually might have had a chance to make better money. Yeah, I know, right? Well, because here's the thing: when you also look at like Batman versus Superman, that made bank. I mean, it didn't make $1 billion for the time. It did if you adjust for inflation. But I'm like, everything was trending upwards, and then you're like, now we're just gonna tank the whole thing. And I'm like, what? Like, what is going? And that's again, I keep seeing the same like them repeating the same issues with like the James Gunn Superman movie, because as far as I know, it could be a great movie. But it's like too much stuff. I'm like the Crypto attacking him when he's like on the ground. The suit is horrible. And it's like there's too much, particularly when I read all the like plot leaks and stuff. I'm like, this could go one of two ways. It could be good or it could be really bad.
Right? It's when they started doing all the spin-off movies and they're like, we're gonna do a Batgirl movie, and I'm like, you don't even have a solid like Batman in your.
I know. I'm like, what?
Why would you do this? And then they're like, and we're gonna do Blue Beetle, and we're gonna do, and I'm like, oh god, and the Flash movie. Oh,
so it's kind of funny. So I know. So my dad is like not a comic book guy. He's a normie. So I asked him, say you want to go see Blue Beetle, and he goes, who?
What the?
I'm like, yeah, that's your problem right there.
My dad probably would have said yes.
Yeah, but
my dad likes to go to the movies. He'll watch anything. He dragged us to some truly terrible movies when we were kids.
We all have that one parent. We all have that one. I got dragged to a bunch of rom-coms by my mom and my sister. I used to have my Game Boy there, and unfortunately, it would run out of battery like halfway through the movie. So I'm like, oh no, I gotta watch this now. That was always the worst part, dude.
I mean, he loved movies. He introduced me to some stuff that I ended up liking too. He got me into Star Trek Next Generation.
No, there you go.
He guilted me into it.
Right.
Yeah, he guilted me. He guilted me into it. Like I was like, he was, he'd been on the air, and I'd seen like the Gloob figures, and I was like, man, these look kind of stupid. And I'd seen the Star Trek movies, and I'd watched the original series, but I was just like, I don't know. For some reason, I was like really snooty about it. I was like, trying to bring back Star Trek. What? I'm not watching that. And one day he was like, hey, come in here and watch this Star Trek episode with me. And I was like, Dad, I don't care about Star Trek. And he was like, just come in here and sit down and spend some time with your old man. And I was like, all right. Like, you guilted me into it. And I sat down and I watched it. And it was the episode where, and, I only had the vaguest idea of who these characters were, but it's the episode where Picard gets taken by the Borg. And
okay, there you go.
And you get that moment at the end of the show where Locutus is saying, resistance is futile. And then the camera spins around the bridge past all the cast members, and it lands on Riker, and Riker goes, fire. And then the episode ends with this dun, 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 dramatic music. And he was like, what did you think? And I was like, holy crap, that was great. I was like,
yeah.
I actually can't wait until next week to see the next episode. And he goes, oh no, that was the season finale. You gotta wait months. And I was like, oh, you son of a bitch. You set me up.
Yeah, I love that.
He started laughing.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, my dad is the one who got me into Star Trek. I was always more of a Star Warsy guy because I'm always more into the action-packed war stuff. Like, I grew up on the prequels because it's like they were coming out around the same time. I liked 1, didn't really like 2, very much enjoyed episode 3, and then when the sequel trilogy came around, that's when I was like, okay, what are we doing here? It's like, so you're redoing episode 4. I don't know what you did with episode 8, and then it's like, I still don't know what you're doing with episode 9. So I'm like, it's like, and something tells me they didn't have a plan either. Neither with Mandalorian, because it's kind of funny. A buddy of mine, when we were reviewing Mandalorian season, I think it was 3, he goes, this would be a great series if it was just if like Bo-Katan did not get all the plot, all the character advancements in the season, as opposed to the Mandalorian.
Well, she's the Mandalorian now. Like, it's ridiculous. I mean, the moment that they put Grogu back with Din Djarin in the Book of Boba Fett, of all places, I was like, this is done. It's over. It's like you had the perfect cap to Grogu's story. You could have done something more interesting with the Mandalorian, but you know what it was? It was a marketing decision. We can't have the show without Baby Yoda. We got to get him back in there. We're trying to sell merch. So that's what happened, and it sucked. And the sequels, the first one came out, Force Awakens came out, and I didn't love it. I obviously recognized that it was just a rehash of A New Hope, beat for beat, pretty much. It was nice to see Han Solo back. You barely saw Luke. But I was kind of like, I was pretty forgiving of it because I came out of it going, okay, you just paid $4 billion for this franchise. You're trying to reestablish it. You're going to play it super safe. And then, and I was like, okay, so the second, and even when people were like, Raise a Mary Sue, because that was already starting, I was like, well, we don't really know what her story is. We don't know what the backstory is. I'm going to give it time. The second part of a trilogy is where you make a mistake, you lose something. I said there'll probably be like something horrific that happens that kind of like sends her on a new path. So it might be interesting. I'll give it a chance. I was pretty forgiving. Then Rogue One came out, and I really liked Rogue One. And it gave me a scene, gave me something that I'd wanted to see since I was a kid, which was just pure badass Vader in that final scene.
Yes, that last scene,
that was so
like
good.
It's dark, and you just see the lightsaber ignite, and I'm like, oh my god.
Yeah, you hear the breathing, the lightsaber, and he's just tearing through those guys like tissue paper. I was like, okay, right on. And then the trailer for Last Jedi came out, and I was like, I don't know how I feel about this, but I went in with an open mind. My friend Alan, who I had seen since I think since Attack of the Clones, I had seen every Star Wars movie, including that Clone Wars animated movie, with him at the midnight showing. Last Jedi was the last one we went to.
There you go.
So we go to the first showing, and we're sitting in there, and the crawl goes by, and I'm like a little bit uneasy because I'm like, this is taking place like immediately afterwards, like immediately. And then it opens up, and we got to the Yo Mama jokes with Poe Dameron.
Mhm.
And I was like, oh, no. And after that opening scene, when we got out of the theater, Alan said, I could feel the irritation coming off of you in waves. He goes, the only time, he goes, you sat back, and he goes, and I could tell that you were pissed off. And he goes, and then when they did the scene with Kylo and Rey, where he was talking about these people are selling weapons to both sides, you know, he goes, you leaned forward because you were like, okay, maybe, and I said, yeah, I said, I leaned forward to that point because it was the first thing in the movie that I thought was an interesting idea.
Mm-hmm.
And then it went nowhere.
Yeah, exactly.
And when we walked out of the theater, I told him, this is the last Star Wars thing that I will ever pay to see, ever. And so I didn't go to see Solo, and neither did anybody else. I didn't pay to go see Rise of Skywalker. I had a friend who signed us into the Disney lot to see it because she was in SAG. Okay. And she was like, we just got to go experience this together. And then we didn't talk for 3 years.
I feel like the two of them are connected.
That's not why, but it was like, but it's like the good joke that we came up with after the fact is like, you know, we just walked away from each other at that point and just, you know, didn't speak until we both processed our feelings on Rise of Skywalker.
My favorite complaint that they had at Lucasfilm. So this is after they decanonize all the good stuff. They're like, we don't have novels or comic books to base this off of, and all of us are like, you do though. It's
you have
like just
decades
take one off the shelf.
Decades. As a matter of fact, that's what your boy Dave Filoni does. Is he just cannibalizes the expanded universe, takes things that were cool in the EU and works them into his vision of Star Wars and makes them infinitely worse.
See, I don't think that. I'm not as big of a Dave Filoni hater. Let me put it this way: do I like what happened with Ahsoka and basically making Sabine a Jedi? No, because I'm like, why does everyone have to be a Jedi? Like, no,
because Filoni doesn't have any original ideas.
Well,
all he can do, he's just a cover band, and all he can do is play somebody else's music, but worse.
Who would you put in charge of Star Wars if it were up to you?
God, I don't even know. I don't even know who would do it. Who would want it?
That's the question, though, because it's like, who would take it?
I mean, I guess me. I guess I'm the only one.
It'll be me. I'll assume complete control.
Yeah, it's I'm the only person I can think of that, because you know, up until this week, I might have said Tony Gilroy because I started watching Andor this week. And
I heard about that.
Well, I started watching the first season finally because I didn't have to give Disney a dime to do it. And I was like, you know what? I like some of the writing in this. I like the fact that it feels like I was able to watch it because it felt like generic sci-fi show. Yeah. It didn't necessarily feel like Star Wars. You know, they didn't have a lot of Star Wars elements in it. You weren't seeing stormtroopers everywhere. It was kind of like in another part of the galaxy that didn't have like a huge Imperial presence. So you had like corporate security and things like that. But there was one interplay between two of the characters, two of the corporate guards in that first episode when they're talking about the murder. And the main guy or the guy that's in charge is saying, what do you want to report? That they were drinking in a place of ill repute that's not supposed to exist. You know, at a time that they were supposed to be on duty, drinking beverages they're not supposed to have, you know, it was something like that. And he went through this whole like kind of thing. And I was like, this is actually pretty good, pretty good writing between the characters. I'm more interested in this guy than I am anybody in any of the Ahsoka shows. And he's just like some corporate stooge, but I already find his character more compelling and more realistic than anything, you know, Filoni has done in live action. And so I would have said like, you know, hey, maybe he needs to do more stuff. But now with season 2 dropping, and that debacle, I'm pretty much
I haven't watched it, but I know what happens in it because that was like blowing up Twitter, and I'm like, you put what in Star Wars now?
Yeah, it's all over the internet, and then it's not just that they put it in Star Wars, it's the fact that they came out and made statements about it that are so monumentally stupid.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
That like it's just like, oh god, here we go again, and it just killed my interest in watching the rest of Andor. Like because once you know where you got to go, That's why like nothing that they do that's connected to or that's in between the original trilogy and the sequel trilogy or anything that takes place after the sequel trilogy, anything that you do to recognize the sequel trilogy, I'm already out. Because if I know that's where we're going, yeah, if that's where we're going or that's where we've been, I don't want any of it.
And the interesting thing is that also in Clone Wars, here's the thing, they set up the way that they can retcon all that stuff out with like Star Wars timelines and stuff. So the capacity is there. The will has to be there, which I don't think the will is ever going to be there. That's the sad part. Let me ask you this. Now, let's say you're put in charge of DC. How do you fix DC?
DC is a lot easier than Marvel.
I think so, too.
DC, you just go back to basics. I mean, the first thing that you do is you cull all of these ridiculous projects that they do on the side. No more Harley Quinn fartaculars. Actually, no more Harley Quinn. Thank you. No more Harley Quinn book whatsoever. Done. We're taking Harley back to being a villain.
Yeah.
We're that's where she's gonna go. We're gonna cut all these side projects like Fire and Ice and
not everyone needs their own book. That's the thing.
Well, if you're going to give somebody their own book, you better have a compelling story to tell with those characters by a talented writer and a good artist. That's going to be the litmus. So we're going to pare down the book. It can't
be like their sexuality or race is the compelling story. That can't be a thing with that.
That's absolutely right. We're killing all that. We're going back. We're doing one more Crisis, and we're resetting everything.
Hey, there you go.
And then we're moving forward from there. I know that people are tired of it, but it's like, I think at this point, people would accept one more Crisis if it got them back the characters the way that they wanted them. One thing I'm doing away with largely, no more Bat Family.
Yeah.
No more. Like, there's too many Bat characters. There's too many Superman characters. John Kent going back to being de-aged, and he's going back to being a kid and hanging around with Damian Wayne. We're going to return to the stuff that worked. And we're going to tell new stories that are interesting. And here's what I would do.
Yeah.
If he would want to do it, I'd say, Jeremy Adams, you're the man right now. You are the architect of the DC.
Yes.
It's like, I'm editor-in-chief right now. You are the architect, or I'm publisher, whatever the position is. You are the architect of all of our universe. You just have to give the through line for what everybody else is going to do. And then from there,
I like that.
We'll have editorial, meet that standard. Because you have the perfect blueprint for the DC universe already. It's what they should have used for the movies. It's what they could be using for the comic books. The distilled, perfect DC universe is what they did in the animated series. What they did in Justice League Unlimited, what they did
in terms of running a continuity. Yes. In terms of like the characterizations of certain characters like Wonder Woman. No,
I don't mind that characterization of Wonder Woman. I wrote a pitch for a Justice League Unlimited comic that never ended up going anywhere. Lionel Castellani did the art. The idea was that he would do an arc, then James Silvani would do an arc, and we were going to continue Justice League Unlimited. So I was able to use that characterization of Wonder Woman, and I was going to kind of like push her forward a little bit and like blend the two. So blend comic, the way she is in the comics with how she had been in the animated series, and kind of advance her. Because I think that those things really work is when you.
It could have if they gave her more attention. Well, my issue with that is I'm like, stop pushing her with Batman. That doesn't work.
Well, I was gonna make that work, but I was gonna.
Sure.
I was gonna make it work, but then I was gonna pull the rug out from everybody. Like it's like that's the fun thing is give people. This is my philosophy with anything. This is my philosophy when we did Darkwing. Anything that you come in that has a pre-established fan base. Give the reader what they want, but in a way that they do not see coming or that they do not expect.
Okay.
So, because you have to surprise people.
Yeah,
but at the same time, you have to pay off their faith. So, if they have the faith in what you're doing, they have the faith in, the story that you're telling. It is really rough right now for writers. I will say this, because a lot of the fans don't, because they've been burned so many times, they don't give the story time to unfold.
Yes, exactly. That is the issue.
So like, because I did this in this issue does not mean that you know what I'm doing. Like,
that's what I think. It's kind of interesting. I was saying this on my gaming stream today. I think what these companies need to do, like if they need to say, okay, we know that like what happened in this issue has you all talking. It's part of a larger story that we think you guys are really going to enjoy. Just give us the time to do that. If DC and Marvel came out and said that more, I think it would alleviate a little bit of that distrust slightly.
You're never going to be able to please everybody. For
Yeah,
example, on Darkwing Duck, when James and I met with Tad and we were deciding what we should do with the different characters and how we should move the story forward, one of the things that Tad told us was the original idea for Quackerjack was to make him darker and more like the Joker. But what happened was Michael Bell came in and looked at the character and did a voice for him that was fun and goofy. And then everybody started writing him fun and goofy. And he goes, so we never really got the Quackerjack as I kind of like envisioned him. So we started off with a darker Quackerjack and we gave like some psychological reasons. And we were going to build on that. Quackerjack was actually the character that was going to have the longest arc through the book. Him and Negaduck were going to have the longest like continuing story. And, you know, of course, we got canceled twice. So we never, both times due to the incompetence of the publisher the first time, the size and inexperience of the publisher the second time.
Okay.
So we never really got a chance to fully develop that. But we had fans that were complaining that, and it was a very small group of fans, but, you know, completely valid, that our version of Quackerjack was not completely the version that they knew from the show. And I just kept saying, like, give us time. I'm going to tell you why. And we had a whole plan for that. And actually our 9th issue would have dealt with it, but we got put on hiatus at 8 of the second run. So we never got to it. The script's written. It's in James' inbox. And if he ever decides that he wants to just put it out as a fan project, we will continue doing it. If his schedule ever opens up enough, we'll continue doing it for the fans. And because I'd really, if nothing else, I want to finish Negaduck's story and I want to finish Quackerjack's story, because we were playing the long game, because both times we were guaranteed longer runs than we got.
Okay, that works. So going back to how we would fix DC, with me, I agree with you. Yes, do a complete reboot to wipe out all this stuff. But here's where I'm going to deviate. I think eliminate John entirely. 2 reasons. Number 1, he's kind of redundant because you have Connor. Number 2, I think too much character damage has been done that you could make the argument that character is kind of unsalvageable there. So I'm like, if you have
Jeremy
Connor,
Adams said he had a pitch to fix him. And so I would listen. I would listen to that.
Jeremy Adams, look this way. Unless Jeremy Adams redeems the character, okay, fine. Yeah, exactly. It's like Jeremy Adams is also the only one where I think could save Trinity, because as far as I'm concerned, I don't think that like the daughter of Wonder Woman, as soon as King leaves the book, which could be soon, based upon the fact that the sales are tanking, I really think that no one's going to use Trinity or the Sovereign ever again.
Oh, I doubt the Sovereign ever gets used again. Oh, no, what a terrible,
what a stupid idea. And I'm like, here's the problem with that. That's not a Wonder Woman type of villain. At least make him a god or something like that. But no, he's just like a toxic male in America.
When you create a character and it's meant to be taken seriously, and I look at that character and I say, I wouldn't even use that character in a parody. That's a problem.
Yes, exactly. I'm like, how is this guy intimidating? She could hold him up by his little. How much have you read of the Wonder Woman run?
I read like a couple of, like the first couple issues, and then I was out. I only read them because, you know, we had to review them on Wes's channel, or we had to talk about them. I already know what you get with Tom King, so I don't pick up his stuff at all.
Do you want me to tell you how the whole thing ends? You're gonna laugh your ass off at this.
Yeah, please tell me.
So she shows up. So obviously, so she walks into the White House, and the Sovereign just gives up. He throws up his hands, and then so Wonder Woman takes out a dagger and has him carve the words liar onto his own chest. So according to Tom King has this issue where all of it, where we're like, when he writes Wonder Woman, he writes her as the Guantanamo Bay psycho Wonder Woman. Like, she punched her mother in the face in a flashback. She cuts him up. She basically tortures gods in the most recent issue. So I'm like, what the hell is this?
So she had him cut liar into his chest because Tom King has seen Inglourious Bastards, but he didn't want to do it on the forehead because that's too much. That would be too close. So he just had her do it in the chest.
Yeah.
Everything Tom, like, people praise Tom King's Woman of Tomorrow Supergirl run, and I don't get it, because it's just True Grit. He watched True Grit and he copied it and he put it in the superhero universe, and it's not different enough to be interesting. It's obviously just True Grit, and I don't get it. Like, it's the Emperor's Clothes. There's a couple of guys in the industry that are just the Emperor's Clothes, and they have people who I would say are borderline illiterate that just, it's the most mind-blowing thing that they've ever read. But if you're if you have any kind of literacy at all and have read some things, you know exactly where all this stuff is being stolen from.
To quote Max Priestley, Tom King writes for stupid people who think they are smart. And I'm like, that is so true.
That's perfect. Love Max.
That is so true. But it's like, yeah, or it's like, he legit in his Batman run copied a Superman issue.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, wait, what? Or so he did an issue later on the Wonder Woman run where like Diana's like under the influence of the lasso of lies, and in that she's imagining herself as a 1950s era housewife, and then her mother comes in and breaks her out of it. So so what I did is I dropped the Wonder Woman book and started reading a bunch of back issues and stuff. So I'm reading through one of the digital first books. It literally starts off with Wonder Woman is a 1950s era housewife in a delusion. So I'm like, you ripped off this as well?
Of course he did.
Everything he does is ripped off. Ashton has a question for you. He says, who is your favorite DC superhero and who is your favorite villain?
Favorite hero, Nightwing.
Oh, there you go. That's a lot of people's favorite.
Followed by Superman.
There you go.
Favorite villain in the DC universe. That's tough. I like so many of them.
Yeah, so many of them are great.
Yeah, I like so many of Flash's Rogues Gallery. I like so many of Superman's villains. That is tough. Wow. I mean, Darkseid is great, but he's
overused.
He's pretty overused. The Joker is way overused.
Yeah. The Batman Who Laughs is way overused.
Oh, the Batman Who Laughs. That's a character that I absolutely hate. Just because I'm kind of like at a loss right now. I'm thinking back to even the Justice League Unlimited card. You know what? It's got to be Lex. It's got to be Lex Luthor.
Yeah. Yeah, he's dope. Mine is Slade.
That is a good one.
Yeah. I just love he thinks things through. I love that there's this one issue he's fighting the Justice League and he just holds his sword out because he knows what angle Flash is going to come in, and Flash just runs into his sword, and I'm like, oh, wow.
You know what you just did to me? You did the thing where we're ordering lunch and I pick something and then you order something and I go, oh, that's actually better.
Because he's awesome. That's the thing about it.
I loved in Identity Crisis when he takes out the whole, he knocks unhooks the wings from Hawkman, punches punches Zatanna in the gut, so she's vomiting bile and she can't I think he punches her in the kidney, but she's vomiting bile so she can't use her spells, and then basically starts to take the ring from Kyle Rayner just by holding onto his hand, and Kyle's trying to use it and Slade's just testing a theory. Your ring's based on will, right? And it's Slade has a stronger will than Kyle does. I thought that was good.
My favorite Slade moment is when he's trying to get away from Superman. He just throws green rocks at him, and Superman thinks it's kryptonite. And I'm like, oh.
That one I missed. But no, that happened in a Superman story too, with the ring thing, where he took the ring from Guy Gardner, where the ring disappeared from Giles' hand and it appeared on Superman's, and Superman said, it comes down to will, and it would be pathetic if yours was stronger than mine, because Guy always gets dissed. But
yeah. Ashton also asks, what is your favorite Superman run or story?
Favorite Superman story? There's a lot of Golden Age stuff that I like. Obviously I like All-Star Superman. I wouldn't say that it's my favorite.
It's a good story. It's not like this is the greatest Superman story of all time.
No, when I first really got hooked into Superman, was the leading up to the death of Superman, and then through the death, through all the way through the reign of the Superman. So that's probably I know it's not the best run, it's not the greatest run. There's been Superman stories that are more beloved, but it's always tough for me to say this is a single story that I loved, because I tended to collect in runs.
Okay.
And so runs on characters were always like kind of like my favorites. So I would say I love that, the death up through the return. And even when he was electric blue and then split into blue and red, like I was into all of that. Like it's funny because McFarlane recently released figures of those.
Yeah.
And Dolan posted in one of our chats, you know, the assortment that it was in. And he's like, "Who the hell are going to buy these?" And I was like, "I
just raise your hand.
I can't wait. I can't wait to buy them."
Yeah, there you go. My favorite is Superman Wonder Woman from the New 52 by Charles Sewell, because there's this great moment where Wonder Woman takes Superman to meet her family, the Greek gods, and Apollo says something like a-hole like, and he blasts Superman with sunlight. He doesn't know who Superman is. So Superman is like supercharged, and Apollo's like, wait, how are you not dead? So Superman goes, you hit me with sunlight. Wait a minute. How do you not know that much about me? And then he just throws him through a volcano. And I'm like, yeah, that's a dope one.
See, that would be good in a DC Marvel crossover. Like I always thought that, you know, if you could make that happen. Like I like the idea of the X-Men versus the Justice League, and I like the idea that Superman is, you know, getting, you know, he's kind of weakened by Rogue. You know, she manages to you know, leech off some of his power, and then and so he's kind of taking a beating, and then you have him go up against Havoc, and Havoc blasts him, and then he's just immediately restored. Like, you know, he's powered up.
Yeah. And he's like, yeah, you don't know. Doom. So they did a storyline in the New 52 when they were teasing Doomsday. And what they did is they made Doomsday kind of a virus creature. And then Superman was turning into Doomsday.
Okay, I remember that one. That one was good. But you know what? I would say that the follow-up to the death of Superman, where he faced Doomsday again for the first time on Apocalypse, that Dan Jurgens did. That was also one of my favorites. One of my favorite, what I considered a Superman story, even though Superman's not in it, is the like Darkseid versus Galactus, that crossover.
Okay.
I mean, Superman's not in it, but it's amazing. And I always consider
Darkseid. It's just a good story.
I know Darkseid is technically a New Gods villain, but you know, if you want to quantify him,
he started in a Superman book.
Yeah, so I always associate him as a Superman villain.
Yeah, he kind of is, and plus he was a big part of the DC animated universe. He had that played by Ironsides. I think Michael Ironsides is like the best voice actor for Darkseid. I think
so too. He's absolutely my favorite.
Yeah, exactly. Now, who's your favorite Marvel character and Marvel villain?
Favorite Marvel character is Captain America. Favorite villain is Dr. Doom.
Thank you. All right. And Britt asked, what's your favorite Wonder Woman story?
Probably Byrne's story where they're fighting against Apocalypse.
That was pretty cool. I kind of like that one.
I mean, he elevated Wonder Woman in that story, you know, and which was his goal. He was like, you know, this is the one of the characters that I've never worked on, and that I don't think she gets her due, and let me do a really impactful story with her. And so that one I really loved. I especially love the scene where there's all the dead Amazons and all the dead parademons, and she and Darkseid are standing there facing off, and you know, she's talking about how he's, you know, they basically like have depleted his army, and he says that death is a respite. You know, death is a respite. That, or, you know, on Apocalypse, death is a respite only given when I will it, and he like goes like that, and then all the parademons stand back up, and I was like, oh, that's insane. That's so horrifying. Is the fact that these things can't even die unless he lets them. That's how much control he has over.
I was never really a big fan of John Byrne as a writer. I mean, he's written some good stuff that I have enjoyed, and probably like drawn some stuff too. It's just, I keep going back to that one image of Superman kissing a 15-year-old Lana Lang, and I'm like, yeah, I'm sorry, bro. I keep thinking.
Yeah, there was some stuff in his Superman run.
Here's the thing: he keeps doing that in his runs, where like there's a very inappropriate age difference, and I'm like, God, what are you doing?
And then he had Superman like bang Big Barda in that weird porno issue.
Yeah.
Like, sleazy guy was like control. I was like, what are we doing here? Like, there's just sometimes
this isn't a porn issue.
Not every idea is a good idea. Like, you know, I've had plenty of ideas where I've like, you know, this would be kind of interesting, and then like I follow it through to its conclusion, and I go, no, that would be bad, and you know, you discard it.
Yeah. The other thing is that I was never a big fan of his Superman run, because I think he overemphasized the Clark Kent identity as opposed to the Kal-El, because I get that you have to have like a balance because they're both half of the character, but I don't like when like a writer like minimizes one to hold up the other.
I mean, that makes sense. I saw a pitch for a Superman movie online that I thought was pretty funny. They said, do a Superman movie, but make it a comedy where the CIA is trying to kill Superman. Not Superman, but they're trying to kill Clark Kent because he keeps exposing things. And they're completely mystified as to why they can't kill him.
That would be great, actually. That would be a great Superman movie. Oh, my gosh. Atchison says, trunks or no trunks?
Oh, gotta have trunks.
Okay, we're going to... Yes, agree on that one. I think the trunks are kind of dated nowadays.
I mean, they're dated, but they're classic. They're what I mean, look, you're already when people go like the trunks are ridiculous. That's from a bygone age. Well, I mean, so is having a big logo on your chest and wearing a cape, but we love that. So like, you know, the trunks, they break up the costume. Otherwise, it's too uniform. I know they do the belt. Well, and I didn't hate Cavill's costume. I actually disliked the costume from the James Gunn movie way more than I.
Oh my gosh, yes. Like that. You know, it's bad when Axel Braun is saying I should have stayed in to show you guys how it's done, and I'm like, oh god. But it's like, see, I would be fine with the trunks if the artist didn't draw them like they're a separate piece in underwear. If it's just like a coloring in that region, I'm fine with that because, yeah, I get that it breaks up the color thing. But the problem is too many artists draw it like it's a separate piece. So I'm like, that's where my issue comes in with that.
So where it's got like the little leg flap, like
exactly.
Okay.
This one has that, by the way. It's kind of funny. I showed my mom the James Gunn Superman trailer, and then she goes, "Why is Superman wearing a diaper?" That's what it looks like. It's a separate piece.
I showed it to like, so I have my friend Marie is like my normie go-to because she doesn't really care about any of the stuff. So I can always get like the pure normie perspective from her. And when I showed her the James Gunn Superman trailer, all she said about it was, it's nice to see Superman actually trying to save people. Like when he saved like the little girl. And I think because she was flashing back to Man of Steel because she went to see that with me.
He did.
And we walked out of there just like, we walked out just exhausted. And she goes, at one point, like, you were yelling in the theater, and I was like, was I? And she was like, yeah, it was when he snapped Zod's neck. You were like, nope, no, no. She goes, you were like so mad.
All right. I'm going to defend that because I think it's pretty obvious.
We're going to fight.
It's all good. It's all good. But as opposed to, he does save people in that movie, and he tries repeatedly to get the fights out of like populated areas. In terms of the Zod like fight, in terms of the Zod snap, I always thought of it like Superman has killed Zod many times in the comics, so that was like nothing really new. And Zod didn't really leave him that much of a chance, is the way I kind of saw it.
I'm going to give you a bigger reason, just from a cinematic standpoint, why that doesn't work.
Okay.
I'm holding Zod's head to keep him from using his heat vision on this innocent family.
Yeah.
Number one, you can fly up. Number two, why does Zod need to turn his head to look at the family that's over there? I can look over there and I don't have to turn my head. If the heat vision's coming out of my eyes and I look that way, that's where the heat vision's going.
But
if you set up a situation in your script to get to a conclusion that you wanted, the conclusion was, I want to put Superman in a situation where he has to break Zod's neck, but you really didn't. He didn't have to. The setup was not properly done.
In his defense, whenever we see heat vision being used in the movie, it's always a straight line and not like to the side. So it could be a little like it could only be used in a straight line because it's
but you see it coming out of his eyeballs looking straight forward.
Yeah.
So in theory, you should be like, if his eyes move, the beam should move. Because where is it coming from? It's coming from his eyes. It's not coming from behind his eyes, and his eyes are the conduit. It's not coming out of his brain into his, orbital sockets and shooting straight out. It's coming from the eyeballs. And if he's shaving with it, I can't remember if he does that in the movie, but
he
in the
does
comics,
in the animated thing. He does, yeah. But I think that the way they did establish it is that it is behind the head. But the way I kind of always saw it is it's like, yeah. And some people say that, like, yeah, Superman could have put his hand over Zod's eyes, but the thing is, they established earlier in the movie that wouldn't work. So it's like this way. It's not like it's a perfect scene. I just was like, okay, I'm against I'm against superheroes having a no kill rule, particularly movie Batman. What I mean by that is every movie Batman has killed. Keaton did it with a smile. So I was like, why are people pissed off at Affleck for killing people?
I mean, people were pissed off at that. People were pissed off at that. Like, I didn't like that when I was like watching it, and he's, you know, Batman's just straight up. I didn't like him branding people either. I was like, oh, it's like he's like this weird, like, sadist. You know, it's like it's because Zack Snyder likes to be edgy. That's why he says things like Batman could get raped in prison in my movie, and you're like, what? You know, it's like he wants to be edgy and he wants to be dark, and he has quotes out there where he's like, I never liked comic books until I read Watchmen, and I was like, wow, you can have like sex and ultra violence in a book, you know, now I'm into it. And it's like, okay, well then you should be doing Watchmen, you should be doing Wolverine, you know, you shouldn't be doing Superman.
In his defense, I think that I've seen the full clip, and that was taken out of context. But I'm just gonna like go on with that. But it's like, let me ask you this: which version of Justice League was better?
Oh, his was way better. His, like, no doubt, his was infinitely better.
There you go.
Just the Darkseid scene alone, like replacing Steppenwolf with Darkseid in the invasion portion of the movie, was infinitely better. And I understand after seeing his cut, and after seeing his cut, I understand why Ray Fisher was pissed off.
Oh, yes. Like, when you see it, I'm like, yeah, when you see how much stuff was, like, cut out, I'm like, oh, God. I didn't understand, again, like you, I didn't understand, why are you so pissed off? Then when I see the movie, I'm like, okay, now that makes sense.
Yeah, and like, just in all the stuff that Joss put in.
Flash falling into Wonder Woman's boobs, and I'm like...
He does that in every single thing.
I know!
It's just
where Martha says, where Martha says, and Clark told me you were the thirstiest girl he ever did meet, and I'm like, what?
When the Flash's whole thing about brunch, and then when he says to Bruce, you know, if she kills you, we'll all cover for her, and I was like, shut up! You know what, Superman? Come back and break this guy's neck.
Yeah, kill everyone, turn evil and kill everyone. Yeah, that was the thing. It's like, all right, so it's kind of funny. When I saw the Snyder Cut for the first time, it's like, I'm sitting down and I'm like, please don't suck, because I waited 4 years for this movie. It would be really sad if it sucked. And I watch it, I'm like, yeah, I think... Now, let me ask you this. After seeing the Snyder Cut, because that's more or less where he was going with it, if he had been allowed to complete his like film series, would you have been more on board?
I would have rather him complete his film series than get what we got. Because even if I don't completely agree with this creative decisions that were made, I would rather see a coherent, cohesive vision throughout than the mess that the absolute mess that we ended up with.
Yeah, exactly. Because I'm like, first off, it's kind of funny. They called that movie a Birds of Prey movie, but it wasn't, because I'm like, where's Batgirl? Which I understand you have a Batgirl, but you couldn't cast Barbara Gordon, because I'm pretty sure she's a very important part of the Birds of Prey. And don't even get me started on Cassandra Cain.
Oh yeah, no, Cassandra Cain was horrible. The Black Canary casting was stupid.
Well, not only that, she only used her power once.
Yeah, and you know, the thing is, that's a really pretty actress, and I don't think she did a bad job. I don't think she's a bad actress. No. You could have given her a much better, more substantial role that she was more cut out for. Yeah, kept Black Canary the same, as she is in the comics. And you guys really messed up because you put Huntress in a movie. I love Huntress, and then you cast what's her name? Ramona Flowers. Winstead, Mary Elizabeth Winstead. Yeah. You cast her, who I'm already inclined to love and you put her in a movie that I absolutely despised.
Yeah.
And also
Exactly.
stop with the Harley Quinn and the name, like from the beginning, the name. Birds of
Harley,
Prey.
it was like
and
it was like Birds of Prey and the Fantabulous Emancipation one Harley Quinn. Didn't they shorten it to Birds of Prey because it wouldn't fit on the marquee?
Well, and then they just started trying to call it Harley Quinn.
Yeah, because they realized that no one knows what Birds of Prey is.
Yeah. So
I'm just like, yeah. But and then you get to like, I mean, I didn't think any of the Aquaman movies were necessarily bad. One was definitely better. Shazam, I was like, Shazam 1, I think was good. The second one should have been a Shazam and a Wonder Woman team up movie.
Well, you should have had Shazam in the second one fighting Black Adam, but we all know that The Rock, that was too small for him.
Well, here's the thing. The Rock's movie, Black Adam, would have made $1 billion if instead of the Justice Society, it was Black Adam fighting Superman.
Yeah.
There's no way you can't tell me that wouldn't have made $1 billion.
Maybe at least it would have come closer.
Close to $1 billion. Like it wouldn't have made what it made because again, it's not a draw. The JSA are not a draw in the movies yet. They can be, but they're not yet.
The Pierce Brosnan casting as Dr. Fate was spot on, and I would watch a Dr. Fate movie starring Pierce Brosnan in a second.
Absolutely perfect. That would have been dope. And then it's like with Blue Beetle. Well, Blue Beetle itself wasn't that bad. It's like when you're going to Blue Beetle, I'm like, it's like, again, no one knew who Blue Beetle was. So I'm like, why are you giving all these characters that the general audience doesn't know? Because the thing that they didn't get, and it's like the same thing with like Gunn doing a bunch of D-listers now. They're like, well, he did Guardians. And I'm like, yeah, but Guardians doesn't get greenlit unless you have the moderately firm foundation of the first few phases of Marvel, because otherwise there's no way. Like this way, if Marvel's on the shaky ground that DC is now, and they announce a Guardians of the Galaxy movie, I'm like, I'm not gonna go see this. I don't know if it's gonna be good or not.
Well, it's the Eternals.
Yeah,
the Eternals is the perfect example. Nobody wanted to go see that. Nobody knew who they were. Nobody was interested. And the reason that Feige even chose to put the Eternals in the Marvel Universe is because he said we could do a bunch of race and sexuality swaps and no one will care because they're not that important. Well, you just admitted that they're not that important. And then on top of it, the people that do care aren't going to want to go see it because you did a bunch of race and sexuality swaps. I understand you're aiming for a bigger audience and you're thinking, because the comic audience is small, but and you're aiming for a more mainstream audience, but they could smell a stinker a mile away. And with Blue Beetle, there's not a lot of movie stars anymore. There's not a lot of people that get people to go to the theater. But there's certainly people that keep people out of the theater. And the reason I didn't go see Blue Beetle in the theater, I like the kid that played Blue Beetle. I liked him in Cobra Kai.
Can I take a wild guess on what it kept you out of the theater? Was it the Batman's a fascist line?
It wasn't the line. It was just George Lopez being in the movie at all.
Okay, I see.
Yeah, George Lopez just perpetuates the stereotype that George Lopez is funny because he's not. Every time I see him, every time I hear his voice that is like ball bearings in a can of oil, like every time I see his hamburger meat looking face, I cannot stand him. And so there's just certain people that keep you away. And I understand that may be completely arbitrary and there's people that love him and probably, but it's like, that's just one of those things. I don't like Will Smith. Never liked Will Smith. Maybe after Independence Day, I was okay with him. Maybe. But ever since then, there's just certain people that rub you the wrong way. Pedro Pascal is one of them, even before he started opening his mouth.
Rachel Zegler certainly is that right now.
Yeah. But on the other hand, a lot of people don't like Brie Larson, and I don't really have a big problem with Brie Larson. I have a problem with the Captain Marvel movie being awful and that character being ruined, but I don't have a problem with Brie.
Yeah, exactly. So actually, JC asked the question about your comics, so we'll get to that before we wrap up. So tell us about Doomface. The screen right now.
Okay, so Kneel Before Doomface is my first creator-owned comic. It's up on Kickstarter now. That you can pledge late. So even though the campaign ended, the pledges are still up. You can still get in there. We haven't gone to print yet. We're wrapping up the colors on the book, then the letters, and then we've only got a couple pages to go on the colors. It'll be lettered really quickly, and then we'll move into production. So we're looking to go to print. I mean, I I'd really like to get it into print at the beginning of next month. I don't know if we'll make that, but we're certainly shooting for it. So there is still time to back it and go over there. And there's a bunch of covers you can choose from. There's a digital option if you're overseas and you're like, I'll never get it and the shipping's too much. So we tried to like stack it with different options at different price tiers for everybody to try to take into account just the difference that people have in their economic situation. So it is the story of a villain from the 1980s, Doomface, who almost conquered the world and then was banished. And he's been trapped in the timeless void for 40 years. And through the machinations or the incompetence of a ghost hunter based reality show, they accidentally free him in the modern day. And so he decides that he's going to reestablish, his dominance as the most powerful supervillain and the most feared supervillain in the world. And but he's woefully behind the times when it comes to the way that society has changed and everything. So he takes on the producer of the Ghost show, Lexi Vega. He takes her on as his major domo, and she does it to kind of keep her crew alive because he's ready to kill everybody. And he takes her on because, he does need an advisor, and he does, of course, like to have lackeys. So that's the A part of the story, is Doomface trying to reestablish himself with all of the stupidity that goes on in the world now, and how superheroes have changed and how supervillains have changed. And now his younger brother who betrayed him is like the most powerful villain in the world. So that's cool. There's a nice little bit of sibling rivalry there. The B story is the story of two wannabe superheroes, Notorious KID and Iggy the Inflatable Iguana. And they are leaving their small town and coming to the big city to establish themselves, to be superheroes. They want to make a difference. And the conceit of their story is, what if breaking into the superhero game was like breaking into the modern day comic book industry?
Okay.
Yeah, so a lot of the personalities that you see in the comic book industry, that's the current superhero game. The gatekeeping, the idea that you have to be vetted, and there's people that set themselves up as like in comics, people setting themselves up as the sheriff of Comics Town, and whether you get to work for the mainstream or not. There's that going on in the superhero world as well. So the first real problem that they run into when they get to the big city is not supervillains, but it's the fact that they have to be vetted by the Social Justice League. And the Social Justice League, yeah, that's their name. They're led by the White Knight, and so they basically end up butting heads with them because the Social Justice League, their power is starting to wane. And so they have to continually go out and try to find some other victims to to throw under the bus to make themselves look good. And they choose Spam and Iggy. So that's Spam is Kid's real name. So and it's kind of everything that I love about comics and comic spoofs. So if you've read by Darkwing Run, there's some of that in there. If you've ever read Sam and Max, or you've watched or read The Tick, or you've watched the Venture Brothers, there's a lot of those kind of elements in it. There's like a little bit of Archer feel. That's the kind of comedy kind of based stuff that I'm doing. But there's also stakes. So it's like the story is serious except where it's not. So there's no multiverses. There's no miraculous coming back from the dead. If you die, you die. The only way to come back from the dead is as a zombie. Okay. I'm trying to keep the stakes realistic while also telling an entertaining, fun story that's filled with comedy and humor and basically like a satire of current day comics. And the great thing about that is, whenever I think I've got this many issues of Kneel Before Doomface that I can do before I get to the end, something dumb happens in comics that I'm like, oh, I can lampoon that. There you go. I can spin a story off of that. So yeah, that's the.
I just can't. You had me at Social Justice League. I'm like, oh my god, that is awesome.
Yeah, they were originally slated to. That's them. They were originally slated to appear in the first issue, but we had certain stretch goals. So to get to the page count, we needed to hit a certain stretch goal that we didn't reach. So they're actually going to make their grand appearance in issue 2. Okay. But that is just I just love that. So basic. That is actually really that's an interesting way of doing it. So essentially, it's like Spaceballs, but for superhero comics, essentially. Yeah, probably. I mean, there's definitely some of that. Probably less puns. There's no breaking the fourth wall. I don't really enjoy breaking. I don't think that breaking the fourth wall lands very often.
Mhm.
Unless you're talking about like Burton She-Hulk and maybe some very slight Deadpool stuff
Mhm.
before it got out of hand. But
Mhm.
definitely a Venture Brothers kind of feel to it.
Dope. And when is this um wrapping up again?
So we should be done with colors this weekend,
Sweet.
and then it'll go to letters, and then we've just got to do all the production stuff on the back end, assembling it, and getting it ready for print. And then once we go to print, like right before we go to print, I'll do like a last chance, kind of blitz.
Mhm.
Like, hey everybody, we're going to print on this date. You need to get your order in so we have our numbers locked, and then yeah, we'll be off to the races.
Heck yeah. So, Aaron, it was a pleasure having you on the show. Come again anytime. Let everyone know where you can find you.
Yeah, you can just find me on Twitter as Aaron_Sparrow. I'm on Instagram as Aaron Sparrow. Those are probably the two easiest places to find me. I am on Facebook, but I rarely ever check it. So
As I learned.
if you message me there, it's probably going to be at least a good week, maybe more before I get back to you. So yeah, definitely don't hit me up there.
Heck yeah. Well, everyone, I hope you enjoyed this interview. And again, Aaron, you're always welcome on the show, and we'd love to have you on again real soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Love to come back on anytime. Thank you, Jared.
Yeah. Anytime.
Thanks, guys.
Stay work, everyone, and we will see you later. Bye-bye.